it sounds like I've done it all by myself. Did you pick that up or did I pick that up?
When you called in, I answered you.
Oh, so I didn't have to do anything. Okay, well, I definitely appreciate that. I'm still in the process of learning, which is an ongoing process with me, huh?
Yeah, your microphone sounds pretty garbled, though. I mean, not terrible.
I'm garbled? Is that because I'm too far away or too
I don't
close?
know what's causing. Maybe there's a lot of cell phone activity in your area.
That's that may be possible. Is it any better now?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, good, good, good. I also had someone was calling in at that time, and you know how it goes, beep, 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 when they call in. I need to make it so that can't happen during the program, but I'll do that next time. Another
Right.
important safety tip. Is it sounding pretty good now?
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty excited about today. I don't know if you know what today is, but today is the day that Zelensky gets to give his little, beggars routine in front of the UN Security Council. Yesterday, he went to an arms factory in a missile, basically the weaponry in Pennsylvania. He went to a facility there to check on 155 millimeter weapons and rounds so he could beg for some more. And when he leaves, like Trump says, he'll leave with some more money in his pocket. And but I hope he doesn't leave with the ability to use our weaponry to bomb inside of Russia. I think that would be a pretty big mistake and not something that we should support. I heard something pretty interesting the other day watching it from a Ukrainian blogger, as a matter of fact. And what he said was that it that even if they give uh, Zelensky the ability to bomb deeper into Ukraine, number one, it's not going to change anything, and number two, it would draw U.S. and NATO into this war, which is what we've been allegedly trying to avoid this whole time. But there are people who say that the existential threat right now to continuing this war is if you vote for Harris, you're voting for more of the same. If you're voting for Trump and Vance, they're going to get rid of it. In fact, yesterday during a couple of his posts, I don't know if you know this, but Zelensky does a good amount of streaming himself. He's a social media hound, so he likes to put a lot of stuff out on social media that he can claim, uh, victimization. He's the eternal victim, and so he gets to put things out. Even he said, if Vance and Trump win, I don't know what we'll do. We have no chance for survival. He thinks that Trump and Vance are going to get rid of him. But the fact is, Trump has said he's going to end the war immediately, uh, and Zelensky says, I'd like to know how. Well, the easy answer to that is quit giving him money and quit giving him more weapons. Allegedly, according to what's being passed on by our uh, media geniuses, is that we are allegedly fighting for democracy. Uh, I don't believe that to be true. There's not any democracy in Ukraine, unfortunately, for Ukrainians. And that's part of the reason they weren't admitted to join NATO in the first place. But you can't claim that uh, there's democracy over there. But let's assume, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that for the sake of argument, we're defending democracy in Ukraine. Let's say that's true. Well, they're under martial law right now. Zelensky's term ended back in May, and there doesn't seem to be on the horizon any effort on anyone's part to have a new election, which would be required under their constitution in order to get there. But let's assume that all of these things are true. That number one, there's democracy. Number two, we're helping Ukraine defend their democracy. What does bombing deeper into Russia achieve? Let's say that we give them the ability to bomb deeper inside of Russia, or that these foolish people, uh, which so far they haven't been foolish, so I got to defend them on that. So far, they've been against it, but the clamor is rising, for them to allow it. The Starmer guy from England is all about it. Let's give it to them. Let's help them. There's been a couple other countries in the EC that are clamoring for it, and then quite a few that are saying no, this is not the way to go, and let saner minds prevail. We don't need to be allowing this, because the only way that these long range weapons can really get into Ukraine, Russia, from Ukraine, is the intelligence that shows what is to be bombed has to come from United States intelligence sources, which means our satellites, our intelligence. We're the ones giving them all the intelligence that they have anyway, which is already a questionable procedure. Number two, they're all definitely Western weapons. And number three, the only way to program these missiles, which are definitely proprietary and definitely top secret, is with Western level 99% US input. You can't give this, you can't give these weapons. The US won't give it out, won't give these weapons, just hand them over to Ukraine and say, okay, bomb deep inside of Russia with our long range missiles, and allow them the top secret method of programming these missiles so that it could be, free to run through a corrupt country like Ukraine. We don't give those things out. It's not done. And so, and there's some arguments that right now these ATACMS and all the other shorter range, intermediate range missiles that are currently on Ukraine, including, for example, including some of the tanking fire command orders, are all coming through U.S. Uh, they call them Naomniki, which are uh, mercenaries. Whether they're still on duty or not in the U.S. remains, a well-guarded secret. But Russia claims to have killed a good number of them, and there's a lot of stories that go around about that. And so, assuming all of the things that we said previously are true, that all of the people, or all of the fire commands, have to be entered in by an American, this would then be seen by Russia as a serious and dramatic escalation of what is going on right now. They say that it would be, in fact, a declaration of war, unlike what they've had before, although there's no secret anymore that this war is really, or this conflict is really, a war between the US and Russia, or arguably the US, NATO, and Russia, and is certainly not a war between Ukraine and Russia. Everything that is known so far is a denial of that fact. This is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. And if you still believe that, after everything that is out there, give me a call, let's debate it, and hopefully I can convince you, because If you haven't been convinced yet by what's going on, I'm not sure there's anything that will convince you. But the unclean hands in this scenario are ours, far more than they are from the Russian side. I saw an interesting program yesterday. I don't know if you know who this person is. Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. But as you know about me, if you've listened to me at all, is I like to listen to opposing points of view, especially in the Russian language. There's a guy. He's Ukrainian. His name is Alexei Arestovich, and he was seen by many to be a competitor of Zelensky's. I can't remember if he ran for office or was mayor or something like that, but he was involved in politics, and he has his own shows. You can. I don't know that the translations are any good, and you'd have to read them anyway because he speaks in Russian when he's there. And for me, I have to have, for him especially, the subtitles turned on for him so I don't miss anything, because he's one of those guys which it's common for Slavic men. I don't know why, but they do not enunciate, and a lot of them do not open their mouths when they speak. Now, that is not true for Vladimir Putin. It's not true for Sergei Lavrov and a lot of the political people on the Russian side. They speak very crisp, very clear, and you can understand them well. And so it's I don't need subtitles, or I don't need anything with them. But with this Arestovich guy, I do, and he put out something pretty interesting. In fact, he said something similar to what I'm telling you right now. That he thought the same thing. That even assuming that you get to bomb inside of Russia, what does that give you? So the Kursk region is in tatters right now, where Zelensky's been trying to hold it together, sending more and more uh, units to there as they get killed off by Russia. Allegedly, since August 1, when this started, Russia claims to have killed at least 15,000 in Kursk alone, just in Kursk. And, you know, Zelensky keeps sending more people there. He has to hold it together till he gets to come over here. I've said for a long time now that Zelensky is on the way out. It's just a matter of time. I went out on a limb 6, 8 months ago and said that I thought he would be gone by late August, but certainly by election time. His the necessity of having him around was pretty much going to be gone. I still believe that way, but I have to admit I was wrong. He's not gone by the end of August, but I still think he's on the way out. They've been carting around Zaluzhny, who Zelensky relieved as commander of his military several months ago, back in February, March timeframe, and they replaced him with Syrski. But now he's been seen closely and on display with Blinken, with the foreign minister from England and from other places. So I believe it's in the works to replace Zelensky, and so Zelensky's on his last breaths here, and he shows up yesterday, day before, to come and save the day with his alleged victory plan, which I still haven't seen quite all the details of, but he alleged he's going to give it to Biden first, and he was giving his speech and going to let his speech go out and say what he's going to do. He's supposed to be meeting with Biden and Harris. He's supposed to be meeting with Trump also, maybe with Vance. But yesterday, it's possible they don't meet with him now, because he pretty much blasted him yesterday, saying that they are not supportive of Ukraine and that the victory plan can't take place if they win. And he's basically encouraging people to vote for Harris because he knows his days are numbered. I don't know if you've listened to a lot of J.D. Vance and what J.D. Vance has to say about this, but it kind of echoes what the rest of the free world has been saying all along. If you haven't been following along, uh, India, China, a decent number of South Africa, Brazil, have been encouraging Russia to, uh, especially pre-Kursk, they were encouraging Russia to begin to negotiate. The rest of the world doesn't necessarily, well, I'm not saying they do, they don't. Nobody wants this war if they have any brains at all. The only ones that still think it worthwhile are our military industrial complex and Zelensky. Even Arestovich yesterday was saying that we might need to begin to talk about some of these things, and nobody wants to admit the realities that exist. That Russia has already met virtually its biggest goals in what it called the special military operation. Now, until you settle, you don't know whether the denazification or whether the demilitarization or whether the fact that they can't be a member of NATO will be finalized. But Russia has already defended, if you want to call it that, they have defended the Donbass area as well as Zaporizhia and Kharkov. They've gotten a couple extra areas that they didn't bargain for and weren't on the table prior to April of 2022 after the uh, Istanbul, when they were negotiating getting it done. So there's no doubt that Ukraine is far worse off now than they were in April of 2022, and now saying that Russia is going to have to honor alleged territorial integrity is probably, well, it's a foolish pipe dream. It's not going to happen. You may escalate America and NATO. Escalation may occur, and God help us all if it does, because it really doesn't need to, uh, be increased. The rest of the world is attempting to, or is trying to tone down this conflict, and the only ones who think that Ukraine still has a chance for victory uh, are I don't want to call people names, but loonies like Boris Johnson. They were putting out the other day in England, to get this, said, why don't we give, here's what we need to do. We need to get this, $1 trillion and the ability to bomb inside of Russia, and things will turn around. Really. I'm not sure that anything you do at this point is going to turn around the realities on the battlefield. Kursk, everything that I read, everything that I see is that the push is going to be accomplished within a very near period of time and push people out of Kursk. And there's even a good amount of commentary out there that the reason that Kursk occurred in the first place was to lure uh, Zelensky into a trap. Uh, Zaluzhny has said all along that he was against this. Allegedly, that's part of the reason he was relieved way back then, and that Syrskyi would do it and Zaluzhny wouldn't. Uh, there's been mass exodus of some 100,000 soldiers, Ukrainian, have abandoned their posts and gone. 69,000 soldiers have been charged with desertion in Ukraine. And this is, a horrible offense, but 69,000. There is no sense. I don't want to say no sense. It's now they say that 56% of Ukrainians in the latest polls say that they need to end this conflict somehow. It's pretty funny. because when you say things like this on the American side, you're looked upon as somebody who's not supporting democracy, or you're a, I don't know, useful idiot of Putin or whatever. But I'm not alone in saying these things. It's pretty funny because my channel on YouTube was growing and growing, getting tons of views, and I think I've finally been found out, or that my points of view have been explored, because I think I'm getting blocked, and I mean, I think it's pretty. I think the number of views that I'm getting have gone down dramatically, and maybe it's because I'm not interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's whatever. It's not all that important anyway. But it certainly is suspicious that there were literally 100,000, 200,000 views a day, or 30, 50,000, good number for a while, because they'd go up and down, and now there are very few. And I know that last week, like I told you in the last show that we had a few days ago, that they started blocking RT, Russia Today, and you can still read Russia Today articles. Russia Today is a registered under FARA, and so they can still publish. They don't, because now they've been blocked, but their written content is still available and in English. And RT, Russia Today, is just like our Voice of America that we stream into. You can listen to it on, you know, uh, whatever streaming device you take. You can usually listen to Voice of America, Germany, Arab countries. Russia has a one, and they you can listen to it in there. But and those are not blocked in Russia, but we block RT here, and it's kind of, it's interesting to me. I think I've become a victim of the RT, although I'm not getting paid by anybody. This station and what we do is currently, you know, we do it because we like it, and it's we're building the program, and I think it's interesting. Whether or not I'm being blocked, I don't know. I never ever thought I was important enough for any of that to be blocked. But my point of view is not one that only I have. There are a good number of people who have similar points of view that are broadcasting everywhere, and whether they're being blocked or not is interesting. Some of the other people, you see them leave off. For example, they don't talk about Zelensky. They leave off the Z, or they call him Zell, or they call whatever, because I think that some of the content, and I don't know, but it's just interesting to me, suspicious to me, of how you can get past the bots or whatever it is that limit what you're allowed to say, or that block your content somehow on the screen. And I find it very much questionable that all of a sudden my streams are not getting the views that I was getting basically every day for 6-8 months, and since Tucker Carlson started his deal, and that was in Russian. Maybe it's because it's in Russian. I don't know, but even the English ones are. I mean, it's pretty funny. I'm no longer being pushed to the top. Maybe I'll start paying for some advertising and see where it goes. I don't know. I doubt it, but just for an experimental purposes. So the point is that now here is Zelensky. Zelensky's here in town, and this is his last gasp. He is here trying to, gin up more support for his victory plan, and I was hoping that would be out already. In fact, I'm going to search for it and see what his victory plan looks like. But the big part of it is uh, allowing him to use um, U.S. arms deep inside of Russia. And so I don't know if he's already met with Biden on his plan, and he is allegedly going to put it out to the president quite soon. And he has a plan for victory. I'm very much interested to see what it is, but so far the details of it are not out. He's to present it, but he hasn't put it out in detail yet. And I'm curious to get all of the details on that, but so far they are not available, but they will be. So, but I did want to go to what I have been reviewing and give you some of the interesting commentary that has been coming out as far as some of the news in the last little bit, in addition to Arestovich. Now, by the way, one of the other reasons I wanted to put out and make sure that everyone is aware of is that we don't, as I said, there's not a whole lot that's going to change if Russia or if Zelensky gets to bomb deep inside of Russia. It's just not going to change a whole lot. And part of the reason for that is so over the last week or so, they've used drones and things of that nature to bomb a few warehouses inside of Russia. Now, Russia has hundreds of these warehouses. And so if you allow Ukraine to bomb deep inside of Russia and go after things of this nature, perhaps it could disrupt some of the supply lines. I don't think so. There's probably too many of them, and they'd have to take out far too many. And I don't believe that Zelensky will ever be given, even if he's given the permission to use our weapons to go that deep inside of Russia. I don't think it'll be enough to go there. And people really, they don't have the stomach for that. I don't think people have the stomach for this war to continue to go on anyway. But even if you do that, like I said before, it's not going to change the fact that Ukraine doesn't have democracy, number one. And it's not going to change the fact that Russia already has in place in Donbass, in eastern Ukraine, in all of the areas in Kursk, all of the most of the manpower that it needs. It's not going to prevent the fact that Ukraine has already gone through what, 8 different mobilizations of men. They keep reducing the age. So when they started, I believe the age was 25 to 55 or something like that, where they were mobilizing men of that age. And a lot of European countries have been encouraging them to reduce the lower number to 23, 24. And then, ours is 18. You have to register for selective service when you're 18 in America. But in Ukraine, it's 25. But as I heard on JR's program earlier, all these people are, these young men, they're all running away. I told you I've already met quite a few of them here in Florida that are Ukrainians. I worked with one of them over the weekend, in fact, and he personally paid $8,500 to get out of the country because you have to pay a bribe to get across to a border guard, and the going rate $8,500 for a family, and he's of the age to be mobilized. Didn't want to be mobilized. There are a lot of people who are basically pacifists in Ukraine that do not want to fight, and they have done whatever they've had to do to get out of the country. So the fact is, whether Zelensky gets the ability to strike deep inside of Russia or not, it's not going to change the war on the ground. It's just not. It's going to make escalation a likelihood that if you're allowed to bomb deep inside of Russia because Zelensky takes American weapons, but they have to be programmed by Americans, it's basically an American weapon programmed by an American to get deep inside of Russia. Putin and Lavrov and a couple other ones over there are alleging that this turns it into an attack by an American. Arguably, okay, I can see the logic behind that. I don't know that I agree completely if it's coming from the area of Ukraine, but the same concept would be, all right, we install our Russia, we install our weapons in Cuba, and Cuba fires on us. Is that really? And by the way, Russia has to program all their missiles, and Cuba doesn't get it programmed. The exact same scenario on the other end. Is it Cuba attacking us, or is it Russia? Who's the war between? Who's it between? As I said before, Russia has met their goals territorially, but more importantly, what they've achieved is an even bigger success in drawing attention to the multipolar world instead of one world order. Okay? We get to go around the world and claim democracy is at stake. And democracy doesn't exist in a lot of these places. Democracy didn't exist in Iraq. It didn't exist in Slovakia. It didn't exist. Name them, pick one. Doesn't exist in Yemen, doesn't exist in a number of these places where we keep going and touting the overthrow of other governments. This has been the U.S. Method of operation forever, and now you can say what you like, but a lot of people all around the world are really just tired of it. They don't want it this way anymore. As you know, the BRICS conference is coming up in Kazan, Russia, in October, and I'm trying to be there, and it's going to be interesting. But I heard a statistic the other day. So there are 196 thereabouts, 196 countries in the world. Of those countries, 169 have expressed an interest in the new bank payment exchange, intercountry exchange system to compete with SWIFT. Now, think about this. The US has this SWIFT system. This is what other countries have been railing about for years. India is truly upset about it. You hear it about it from India all the time. The greatest number of people on the planet, the biggest developing country in the world. China is right behind them. And India just has a slightly higher population. A couple, I don't remember how many million more, but it's like 1.6 billion to 1.5 billion, something like that. So there's the difference between sizes, but India's got the biggest population now. And India has been saying for a long time that the Western structure of the United Nations Security Council, for example, that they don't have any power there, and they represent a huge part of the world, and they don't have it. And all of this power is outdated. It doesn't give anyone a voice, and it's disadvantages all of these developing countries, and nobody's talking about it, and nobody talks about. We don't hear enough. How do I want to put this? You have to really be paying attention if you want to get international news of any usefulness in the United States. You got to go out and hunt for it, because we're so proud of ourselves. Let's put it that way. That we're the greatest country in the world, and we talk about it a lot. Okay, I agree with that point. I'm a patriot. I believe in the U.S. I didn't fight for my country. I served my country. I was in the military for nearly 15 years, 10 of that on active duty. I did, I've done my duty, and I support my country, and I was a true believer for many years. That doesn't mean I don't think my country is perfect, or that I think my country is perfect, because I don't. There are quite a number of things that I disagree with, and in how how things have happened, especially with some of the things we do in the shadows. Zelensky's trip and what he has said about Vance and what he said about Trump make it very clear that he's very worried that if that the gravy train will stop if Trump and Vance come to power. Well, the rest of us should want that gravy train to come to an end. There's a difference between fighting for democracy and engaging in your own colonialist war with another country, using another person's or another country's people to bring that about. You hear people like uh, Senator Kennedy. You pick them. There are a bunch of them, mostly Republicans in the Senate, that all get to say things like, "Well, we're not losing anybody. It's only Ukraine that's losing their generation of men. It's not us. We can use their people. It doesn't cost us anything. Well, except a couple $100 billion that we don't have, that we keep throwing towards some victory plan for another dictator who doesn't have a plan for his own exit. And even if he comes to a peaceful resolution, or any resolution, peaceful or not, he can't sign it without some kind of constitutional backup from his own country, because as soon as it's signed and martial law is off the table, he's no longer president and they must have an election according to their own constitution. So he wants the war to go on because he knows that his own country doesn't support him. And so here he is over here trying to get his victory plan together, and trying to get some backing for whatever this victory plan is, because on the big picture, he knows he's done. And he already knows his country's done, and that this war is not the path to victory probably doesn't include 1991 borders of Ukraine. The likelihood of that are slim and none. It's not going to happen. So it's let's give him $1 trillion and see what happens. Okay, Johnson, let's see if that works. Probably not going to happen. And listen, if you're listening to people who know what's going on the ground, there's a guy. He's a Chechen. He's a general. He's in charge of the counteroffensive in the Kursk region. His name is Abdialudanov, and he's from Chechnya. Having just been in Chechnya, in Grozny last month, very beautiful city, very beautiful. They're rebuilding. I have never been there before, so I can't tell you. But according to all popular knowledge of that place, prior to about 7-8 years ago, it was not good. Now there are tons of new apartment buildings, tons of new things. They're rebuilding all the old mosques. They're rebuilding all these old mosques, and very beautiful country, and a lot of things going on. It's very, very pretty over there, and all over in that area. But that's where Abdialudanov is from, and he, these Chechen fighters are allegedly, whatever their brigades are that are over there, they've been tasked with clearing Kursk of the Ukrainians that are there now, and they're fulfilling that obligation according to all popular words. He's wondering, as are a lot of people, what if Zelensky comes back with an additional 60 billion and the ability to bomb inside of Russia? According to him, it's not going to change things. What's he going to leave with this time? What is he going to be able to take away that he shouldn't be taking from us? I remember talking about this some 2.5 years ago, and kind of getting a bit slammed for it, and wondering, I'm not against Ukraine. I've never been against Ukraine. There's some wonderful people over there, but there's also some pretty staunch uh, no, Nazis over there. There's a guy named Stepan Bandera that they support, in a lot of especially in the western Ukrainian areas. And one of the things that Putin has said he's going to do is he's going to get rid of the NATO tendencies. And as I've alluded to you before, and there are a still a good number of these people out there. In fact, you can go out and find memes on it right now. There was several. They were asking some Ukrainian guy, soldier who was wounded in the war, on whether it was TikTok or Telegram, I don't remember, but they were asking him, what's so glorious about Ukraine? Because he says Slava Ukraina, which means glory to Ukraine, and there's terms that you give after that, but they always forget that part. They just say Slava Ukraina, but the additional part of that is Smert Ostonim, death to the rest. You know, kill them all and let God sort it out, basically. So Slava Ukraina, it means glory to Ukraine, but on the end, it also means death to everybody else. And now, I don't know that we believe that way. Do we want to be fighting for that? I'm not. So I know I wouldn't want to be. I don't believe that. I don't believe in not to get too far off track, but I disagree with what's going on in Lebanon. I strongly disagree. I'm not saying I'm anti-Israel. I'm not. Do I believe they're God's chosen from a religious point of view? I have pretty strong beliefs of my own, but you don't go targeting an entire people just because they happen to be other people. Now, that'd be just like us saying the same thing that we were saying after 9/11. We want to kill all Muslims. It's just not. It's not a good argument. And knowing a ton of Muslims myself, you can't just go claim that they're all bad people. You can't do it because they're not. And you can't proclaim genocide to be the way things ought to be. And if you're a Banderite, that's what you're doing. You're claiming Nazism is the way to go. It's all glory to Ukraine and nothing else. There was a guy, like I said, being interviewed on there, and he said, uh, he was the guy interviewing him said, well, uh, he said, why do you say Slava Ukraini? He said, because we're full of heroes. He said, name one Ukrainian hero, and he named Bandera. He said Bandera, and the guy started laughing. He goes, "So that's your hero?" He goes, "Anybody else?" And the guy hung up, and that was the end of it. So, who are your heroes for glory to Ukraine? And it's Banderites we honor, and I don't know if that's the way to go. Listen, people, I don't know what the right answer is to the end of this conflict, but it's a lot different than it was spouted off to us as Americans before we pumped $200 billion, before Ukraine lost a generation of young men. There are videos that are fairly prevalent over there of on Telegram, on TikTok, everywhere else, of young women saying, what are we getting out of this? There isn't a young man around at all. Basically, will you come sleep with me? is is it because there's nobody here anymore? Everybody my age is gone, and so they've lost an entire generation. And if you think about it from the point of view of Ukraine for the future, there's nobody left. They had 40 something million, 42 million, if I recall, in 2022. The estimates were at 42 million. Okay, so of those, quite a few million, by any calculation, it's over a couple million. But there are some estimates that as high as 3 million have gone to Russia. There's another good number of million that went to Europe, another good chunk of a million plus has come to the United States. They've lost. There are no accurate counts because Ukraine doesn't release it, but every once in a while you can find videos, changes in cemeteries and things of that nature, that they show all the fresh graves and all the fresh flags, and it is an astronomical number of people who have died. The Russians don't release their casualty rates either. They consider it a secret. But if you remember Zelensky saying back, I think it was February this year, before he got rid of Zaluzhny, he was given some briefing, and I remember being in my car and actually busting out laughing, going, something like that, where you go, you got to be kidding me. He outlined at that time, 2 years in, that he said that Ukraine had a casualties of 31,000 at that time. That's what he said. Now that was nonsense. They complete nonsense. By any estimate, those numbers are at least 500,000, and it could be between wounded and dead, upwards of 1,000,000. Russia has it at somewhere in the neighborhood of 700,000, between 7 and 8 is what they have it at. And they report it every day. If you get onto the Med Ministerstva of Minister of Interior, basically, when that every day they give a military report, and every day they tell how many airplanes, how many tanks, how many trucks, how many this, how many artillery systems, and how many people have been eliminated. That number is well over 700,000, and they've kept that number since the beginning, and they've broadcast it through the beginning. You can still get it; it's blocked over here, and you have to try to get it from over there. But this is no small war. This is not small. Now, Russia's had a good number too, but the estimates are that if that at a minimum, that according to Russia, they're losing one man to every five that each person lost on the Russian side. Five are killed on the Ukrainian side. And those numbers appear to be similar to what a lot of war college experts, Institute of War experts, are putting out from the other point of view. That those numbers may be fairly accurate. Now, I don't know what to believe, and I don't claim to know what those numbers are. They don't put them out in any detail. But I imagine it's not a small number either. So certainly between the two countries, you've lost 1,000,000 men, no doubt, in my opinion, either killed or killed slash uh, disabled, wounded, can't return to the battlefield, can't come back. And whether they're, lifetime of suffering or whatever they're going to be, it's a very large number. And once again, here we are with no end in sight, an unknown victory plan coming over here for Zelensky to pump out for us. And no real details of that plan, but it doesn't matter what it entails. There is no victory for Ukraine without the involvement, probably boots on the ground involvement, of the United States military. And I don't believe that any of us in America, I know I don't, have the stomach for, uh, boots on the ground war in Ukraine for democracy when there is no democracy. And what do we get out of it? Now, I'm not looking for profit. I don't want profit. But what in the world are we getting out of it? What strategic advantage is there to us? Seriously. Unless you believe the BS that they've been pumping for a long time, that Vladimir Putin wants to take over the world. He's like Pinky in the brain. He's the brain. What are we going to do today, brain? Same thing we do every day, Pinky. We try to take over the world. And if you believe that about Putin, you don't know Putin. And all of these experts that claim that's what he's trying to do don't know Putin, or don't listen to him. You can tell. Why is it that you don't? Why? What is the greatest reason for telling the truth? Seriously, the greatest reason. Isn't because telling lies are wrong, isn't because God said don't tell lies, isn't because any of that. It's because you can't keep track of your lies. You can't keep track of them. The truth, you can keep track of the truth. You know what it is. And so if you listen to Putin over the last 25 years, he said exactly the same thing. And so I suppose you could call him a liar, but he's a damn consistent one. And he doesn't have any interest in taking over Europe and installing Warsaw Pact back to its pre borders. He feels wronged. You can, if you know the history, you can see why he feels that way. Uh, all the way back to Bush one, give us let the two Germanys, East and West Germany's unite. Let them unite, because remember, East Germany was Warsaw Pact country, and Russia was against it, and it wasn't Putin involved in that. But let them join, and NATO will never go an inch to the east. If the questioning back at that time is, why do we need NATO? I renew that question today. In all seriousness, why do we need NATO? Unless you have a big bad wolf that you've created on your own, NATO is for defense only, right? In the US, we're over here, we can defend ourselves. We don't need to defend NATO or defend any country in Europe. Let them defend themselves. Trump said a few things along those lines. I'm not um, anti-ally. I think we need allies. Everybody needs some allies, but they're not your ally if you're paying for everything and if you make every single decision. They're not our allies, they're our subordinates. We pay for everything. We do everything. It's our military all over Europe. Our military is the biggest military in Europe too. And so what do we get out of it? In all seriousness, what do you get? The resources of Ukraine. Let Europe fight for that if Europe's interested in that. It has very little to do with the United States except to drag us in to a war that we don't need to be part of, against a an enemy that, really, what is Russia against? They want a buffer zone between them. They have no reason to trust us. Now, you could argue that we don't have any reason to trust them either. Okay, fine. I can support that position. We don't have any reason to trust everything they say, do we? I don't think so. I don't think. There you go. I don't think that we need to support everything that they say and that they want to do, but certainly it's a competing point of view. And a lot of the rest of the world wonders why we don't listen to any other point of view. I mean, think about all the countries who are tired of it. A lot of them are clamoring for entry into BRICS. That's what's happening. They're wanting an alternate payment system. I had a discussion with somebody the other day about this. I don't want to rat him out, but I had a discussion with somebody about this, and I thought something, an let's call it escalation, right? Let's say, for example, that Zelensky comes over here. We were discussing what's going to happen if the U.S. allows him to bomb deep inside of Russia and targets inside Russia. Well, let's assume I'm Vladimir Putin. I'm not, thank you. But let's assume that I am. And that Vladimir Putin, uh, what would stop him from saying, uh, why don't we, why don't we uh, give Iran everything they need for nuclear weapons? They're our ally as a Russian. Let's say Iran's and they're an ally. What's to stop alleging? Let's say that we give Zelensky the right to bomb inside of Russia. Well, why wouldn't Russia then give Iran the tools to create a nuclear bomb? Uh, they're, according to some popular beliefs, they're fairly close anyway. But from a strategic point of view, and nobody in that area of the world, I don't want to say nobody, but a lot of people are anti what's going on with Israel and Lebanon, quite a number of them, including Iran, by the way. And what's to stop Russia from giving Iran the tools to attack Israel? You give us this, we give them that. Zelensky gets this, we provide that. You put this here, we put that there. It's the same old escalation that we should have been done with after the Cold War. But our alleged experts had different masters to please, and the masters are the same as they always have been for at least 50 to 60 years: the military-industrial complex. And like Zelensky visiting yesterday, arms factories. Like Zelensky there with his hand out and being given a great deal of attention by arms manufacturers. What do we get out of this? Continued huge profits for the arms industry in America. A lot of people claim that even with all of that, our arms industry is far behind the arms industry of Russia at this point. If you remember the mobilization, not mobilization, but calling up or recruitment of building the Russian army was announced a week or so ago, of another 180,000 soldiers, just soldiers. Now, there's also in that um, increase, not that 180, but another number that I don't remember the number of, for increasing the number of regional, like our police forces, increasing, and their FSB, increasing the numbers of those type of organizations inside of Russia, another set number. I don't know the exact numbers of those. I just remember the 180 for certain in the military, and they're growing because of the threats that we keep laying out. If you are aware of this, last weekend, can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday, but Blinken invited, uh, asked for a meeting with Lavrov, his counterpart on the Russian side, and Lavrov said no. He was like, no, there's literally no point. What are you gonna do? There's literally no point to this. Uh, Recently, Maria Zakharova, she's the what do you call press minister, basically Ministry of well, she puts out all the words, and literally she gives these great press briefings every day, and there's always some hitters in there that she gets to put out words about what is going on. And she says they're talking about this alleged victory plan of Zelensky, and they're all making fun of it over there, almost as bad as they're making fun of it in Ukraine, because victory is going to be extremely elusive under any plan, especially one that doesn't include $1 trillion, more weapons, and men. They don't have any more men to throw at this problem. They can go down in age, but then what? They still got to train. They still got a year of putting them together. You still have training that you got to figure it all out. By the time they get them all jazzed up and ready to go, Russia's won. And Russia's already well on the way to that. And it was a fool's errand from the very beginning to think that this would be over. Now, you could argue that Russia has made some mistakes, and they have. That Russia isn't as powerful as everyone wants to say. That's probably true. I don't believe that they're necessarily invincible. I don't say that. I say that they've got their share of problems as well. And their people aren't all for this. They're not as against it uh, as we would like to think they are. There's not a coup waiting to happen on Putin. Nothing of any seriousness. For the most part, people like what he's doing, and if you were in Russia in the '90s, you'd like what he's doing too, because there is no way you can say that Russia today is like Russia in the '90s. When I'm over there next month, I will certainly report on that and tell you what, from my perspective, from my point of view, I've already, you can go check out my videos, and I do them in English and in Russian, and some of the things that I've shown from Russia are quite impressive. There's a lot of impressive uh, construction. Um, how do you want to put it? When you think about it, they're recruiting heavily. You remember that well, you might not remember, you might not know, but I know I've mentioned it before, that Putin has passed a law that allows people from liberal countries to come to Russia and claim residency or be granted a swift path to residence, and the country on top of that list is the United States. And whether you believe it or not, there are subdivisions in Moscow that are built like American subdivisions to attract American people. There are families, there are farmers, there are check them out on the internet. So you can go over and see that are people that are mostly anti liberal agenda, anti let's see, call it the transgender agenda, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, the extremely liberal agenda that we've been forced to accept recently. And they're basically, Putin basically signed this into law. Couldn't have been more than a month ago, where he said you can come over and work here. You can come, and they're short of people. They are short. In fact, Vladimir Putin said something very interesting a couple of weeks ago too. He said, because, and people hear this and they disagree, and of course they don't ever interpret him properly. So basically, what he said was that he thinks one of the great tragedies of the last 30 years is, oh, well, it's more than that now, is the collapse of the Soviet Union. And people want to go, oh, geez, he's trying to reinstitute Soviet Union and blah, blah, but that's not what he said. He qualified it by saying at the end, he said, because instantly beyond our borders were located 25 million Russians who are no longer citizens of Russia. So all of these countries split. The Soviet Union was made up of 15 different republics, 15 different languages. Well, more than that, languages, but they had 15 basic republic languages, and the biggest being Russian. And he said, listen, we lost 25 million people, but that's not what they translate over here. That's not what they interpret over here. They interpret over here, well, he's complaining, he's lamenting the fall of the Soviet Union. He's lamenting the fall of the Soviet Union because all of the Russians that were instantly, how many ended up on the Ukrainian side of the border, which is what this war is about. How many ended up in Kazakhstan? How many ended up in Kyrgyzia? How many ended up in Tashkent? Figure it out. Uzbekistan. Beautiful, beautiful countries, which I was in last year. There's still, I speak Russian. I can go over there and communicate with everybody, and there's still tons of Russians in those areas, but they're not citizens of Russia. They're citizens of Kazakhstan. They're citizens of Kyrgyzia. And in Ukraine, the U.S. is doing what the U.S. always does. They're encouraging, and they're doing it right now in the Far East countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, all of these other places. They're trying, it's all anti-Russia. And it's anti-Russia. Why? Because the U.S. needs a big bad wolf, and they need to make sure that these other countries are anti-Russia, so that the U.S. has first dibs on their resources. U.S. has first dibs on putting in their puppet to run that country, or buy them out, to buy out Tbilisi, Georgia, to buy out Kiev, Ukraine. And Kiev, Ukraine has gone a step further by making it worse themselves with their Nazism and their banderas, or their banderites, however you want to call them, and their SS squads, and nationalist, extreme nationalism, outlawing the use of the Russian language. And if you don't know what our colonialist empire is doing in America, around the world, it's the same as it has been for the last 30 to 50 years. If we had acted differently, maybe we wouldn't be where we are today. As it's it's a shame that we are where we are today, and we're here not necessarily, at least me, that I have to try to convince people that the demon in the room is not Vladimir Putin. And I'm not saying he's a good. I'm not saying he's God's gift to the planet either. But the Russians aren't against him. What I'm saying is that Zelensky isn't necessarily the good guy that you think he is, or that there's not problems on that side of the equation as well. Huge problems, and our own problems that we have created. And don't let me, well, do let me convince you. I hope that I do convince you. I think that it's long past time, and there's some very high scholarly experts out there that might put it out in a better voice than me, that might be more convincing than I am. But if it's not me, you need to listen to somebody who will let you know that war is not the answer, at least not in this instance. That increased funding for Ukraine, that Zelensky's victory plan, whatever it may be, if it includes bombing Russian towns with American rockets, it is not in our interest, not remotely. He's a dying man in the desert looking for a next glass of water. And every time he comes over here, we give him a pitcher of water in the form of 60 billion, in the form of more uh, consultants that we get to send over, in the form of probably um, mercenaries still getting paid by the U.S. government, but also getting paid by the government of Ukraine. We're giving him people like, and I forget his name, the guy that tried to uh, uh, second round of trying to kill Trump. You get people like that. You get people talking about, geez, we need to take care of Ukraine, but they don't know why. They want to take care of Ukraine because of the nonsense that is being pumped down of our throat. I want to take care of Ukraine, by the way. I don't want Ukraine to go away. But we're looking at there talks last month, and these are serious. If you don't know the history of the wars between the people in that region, and there's no way to know them all. There's so many. I mean, how many times has Ukraine been overrun in the last 1,000 years? There's never until 1991 has there been a separate kingdom of Ukraine. There has been the cry, Ukraine, na krayach, on the edge, the frontier. There's been a frontier of Russia and Ukrainians as part of it for hundreds of years. That these ethnic peoples have lived there. Uh, Last century, there's a huge, and these conflicts are still very raw for them. They have a much longer memory than we have. And there's the Polish and Ukrainians were at each other's throats also. And Ukrainians allegedly still have bodies of all of these Poles that the Poles are trying to get relocated back to Poland, or cede the areas of Poland that used to be historically Poland back to us. Then believe me, if you don't know that they're waiting in the wings for Ukraine to die on the vine, they definitely are. And they would be able to take those areas of Ukraine that they claim are Polish in nature. And remember, the Turks overran Ukraine. The Mongolians overran Ukraine. Think about this. For it's a crossroads from Europe to the Far East to Middle East through Greece, through Mycenae. What was it called? The Mycenaeans, if I recall. I mean, all of those things when you go through there. Ukraine has been a war zone for hundreds of years, and it's still there. And but they've never existed independently as Ukraine. And I'd be happy to have someone convince me otherwise, but I'm fairly confident in that, and I would love for people to come back and say something. Now they say, even Kievskaya Rus is Kievian Russia, and basically it's all Slavic there. Think about the Belarusians and running through White Russians and running back and forth through Ukraine. Think about the Hungarians coming from the other direction. That place has been overrun by 15 different nationalities over the last 500,000 years for sure. There's been that many, and if you want to talk about a melting pot, that is it. And but you don't get to come and claim that Putin, by trying to keep Ukraine or trying to take places that had a referendum in the Donbass and in Kharkov and Zaporizhia, where they have tried to have a referendum and say they want to be part of Russia, and then made treaties with Russia and asked for assistance militarily to exit Ukraine. If it was the US doing that, nobody'd question it at all. But only the US gets to decide whether a referendum is worthwhile or not. I don't know whether the referendum was valid or not valid. I know that on the Russian side, they claim it is. Ukraine hasn't even talked about it. You don't hear it. That referendum has been going on for a good number of years, since 2014, when they've said they want to cede from Ukraine and be part of Russia. It's been just like Crimea. Same thing went on there, but we don't recognize those sorts of things because we don't like it. America didn't decide who got to say it. Somebody else did. And if America didn't say what democracy is, then certainly it can't be democracy. Certainly it's not democracy if the US didn't set up the referendum like they did in Kosovo, right? The US sets up whatever referendum they get in, then the US gets to put US boots on the ground and say, well, there was a referendum and these people want to be independent. Why can't they be independent? Because they should be independent because we say so. But if it comes from anyone else other than us, it's not good. How many wars has the US caused through this sort of behavior over the last 50 years, including Vietnam, by the way? Try to pick it. North, South Korea, pick any African country, just about. We're being booted out of all of them. Pick any Arabic country that of any size, or even the smaller ones. It's even more likely. It just that's the way it works. And the U.S. gets to go in, colonize, take all the resources, give people free money, no infrastructure requirements, no nothing. Just you have to use our payment systems to use the dollar, and you have to go through the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund if you want to get anything. Well, that's what BRICS is all about. So if you want to say whether Russia has met its goals territorially, they're almost there. If they get through Pokrovsk, they're there. They've taken over the territories that wanted to be part of Russia. They've done it. They're almost there. There's for all intents and purposes, 90% of the land of the people that wanted to be part of the Russian Republic, those territories are basically under Russian control right now. Russian military are well fortified and in those places, almost completely done in those areas. And once they push the Ukrainians out of Kursk, which they will, then there's the question of denazification, no NATO, neutral country, and a few other things. I think at that point, it'll be interesting to see because 2 years ago, I said, and it might have been on a show of JR's. I don't remember, but I was on the radio with someone. Might have been my own hour show. Might have been through JR. I can't remember. Don't recall. But I remember saying back then, 2 years ago, that I thought that in all likelihood, based on what I knew then, and then I had only been following peripherally and not watching every day and not reading up on these things every day. I only knew my history. I have a undergraduate degree in Russian studies and economics, and then of course my jurisprudence doctorate of law, which I have. But my Russian I do as a hobby. I stay up with uh, news and events in Russia and always have. And I've always tried to pay attention, and I knew a good amount of history. I don't necessarily consider myself an expert. I consider myself a hobbyist, and but have a pretty good idea of what it is. But I remember being on the radio and saying at that time that I thought, in all likelihood, that uh, if Russia entered into the Donbass area, that in all likelihood, Crimea, it's never going back to Ukraine. It's not going to happen. Sevastopol, always been a Russian Navy port. Um, so Crimea, that's off. Always has been off table. That's not going to happen. And but the other ones aren't going to happen either. And it was only two to begin with, but then two more jumped on right after that, as far as the other four republics on the eastern part of Ukraine, which have always been at least 70% Russian nationality, Russian speaking, far more Russian than Ukrainian. It's on the western part of Ukraine where everybody's Ukrainian, and the Russians they all speak Russian anyway. They don't want to anymore, and they won't. You have people that will not speak to you in Russian if they're from Ukraine, and that's still here. You go to a bathhouse or the YMCA or any sauna, and there's always people in there speaking Russian. And if you speak Russian to them and they're from Ukraine, they won't talk to you. They won't talk. It's kind of it's. I mean, there's been some interesting stories of people getting into fights because people are speaking Russian and they say, you're from Ukraine, you shouldn't. It's a shame. It really is that this is what the world has come to. But I always said, even 2.5 years ago, I said that I thought Russia would come into this and then that Putin would stop when he got to the Dnieper, assuming all of his other requirements were met. You know, denazification, no NATO, and demilitarized neutral, and no part of NATO. I still believe that. I still think that is what is going to happen. I believe that once Russia gets to that point, they will begin to fortify. That they may finish. If however, if increases occur, let's say the U.S. grants, this would be my final point. When you get in, let's say the U.S. grants the ability to bombard inside of Russia. Well, now you're not defending countries that want to separate, just like in Kursk, you are attacking a sovereign nation. Where's the outcry of all of this? There's no Kursk didn't have a referendum and say we want to be part of Ukraine. They didn't do that. Ukraine just attacked. Now the argument on the other side is these four republics have all and Crimea, it's actually five, but Crimea we're putting off because that was 10 years ago. These republics have all had referendum and all have chosen to be part of Russia and asked Russia to help them defend themselves while they become part of the country. You know, back under the prior agreements that were in place, this war wouldn't have taken place if those agreements had been honored. Uh, the Minsk Accords, for example, wherein they said that the Donbass region got to be independent republics. They got to be their own countries, not part of Russia, not part of Ukraine, but in between the two, and got to have their own destiny that they got to complete. Well, nobody wants to pay attention. The Minsk agreements, they just don't want to do that. Well, I'm coming up to the end of the show here. I'm not sure if anyone else is on after me or not. I kind of forget. But I want to make sure that we end on a good note. If you get the chance, please log in to my YouTube channels at Samuel Trapp. Listen to me in English and in Russian. You want to see things out there, I kind of simulcast them as they go. I very much enjoy being on the show. I'm very proud of what JR is doing, and I think it's fantastic. And that will be all for me. And as JR says, well, there he goes, and I am leaving. Thank you very much.